Hello ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here, and today we're taking a look at Hatred. Now this is a game that caused quite a stir when it was first unveiled with a trailer from its creator, Destructive Creations, and well, it's finally here. So what is it, exactly? Is it an ironic sort of satire on video game violence? Is it a game with controversy that will create hype that will sell the game and so forth? If I do sound cynical about this game, it's because, well, I was when it was first announced. And what it really boiled down to was, does the game have a very controversial looking trailer and not much substance? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Now, a quick look through the options menu shows a couple of different things, some very basic controls, and there's graphic options right here, which do seem to cause a stutter every time you open it, but there you go. Not too much in that department. Controls-wise, we do have rebindable keys here. You can play this with a controller, and I would probably recommend that in most games of this sort. After all, this is a twin-stick shooter. However, the controller setup is not ideal. There are a lot of unused buttons, so it's probably best to just play this with the keyboard. So here we have a bunch of different keys here, and some of them that aren't even showed in the tutorial. There is actually a tutorial, which is of course set in the main character in his own basement, which is where he prepares for his massacre of sorts. Now, there's easy, hard, and extreme difficulty. Playing it on easy already does provide a decent amount of challenge, but only because the game itself is a challenge to work with. So I'm going to explain what I mean by starting up the game.
My name is not important. What is important is what I'm going to do. I just fucking hate this world and these human worms feasting on its carcass. My whole life is just cold, bitter hatred.
Alright, so I skipped that cinematic because we've seen it countless times in trailers and everybody that's made videos of it, and frankly it's not particularly well written nor interesting at all, so let's just get into the game. Now, I'm running around here with a gun and nobody seems to be panicking, which is quite fine. Oh, they've noticed me. That woman has eyes on the back of her head. And within 5 seconds, you've basically seen everything there is to see in this game. Now, before I show off an execution, bear in mind, if you are sensitive to scenes such as this, please look away. And I did miss that opportunity there. Alright, so, what is the objective of the game? There is actually an objective, and it's to exterminate the populace. That is basically what the game is about. There are objectives such as this. This is just the first stage, and I will say it is quite large. It is a very large area. But the game itself has numerous problems, not least of which happen to be the frame rate. It has dropped to 30 frames per second for absolutely no reason at this stage. Now bear in mind, I'm running with an i7-2600 and a GTX 970. It's not SLI, but I'm trying to kick this guy and it doesn't seem to be working. And it's just dropping down to 30 frames a second. It could be the capture software, but DX Story normally doesn't do this, so that is very strange indeed. Alright, so this comes our first actual enemy, aside from that guy with a gun over there.
The first human shields.
That's also not the first time he said that.
Can you hear your guardian angel cry? I can.
Now, enemy variety at the first stage is not particularly great. There's a bunch of police, some carrying pistols, some carrying shotguns, but they die in the same number of shots for the most part and can be executed in the same way. Executions regain health, and that's about it. That's not really new to any game of any sort, since executions have been done in many games before, from the curb stomping in Gears of War to, well, think of any other game that runs in this sort of fashion. Can't quite think of one off the top of my head right now. Now, you'll notice that it has a unique sort of graphic style. Let me just shut him up for a moment. Everything is in this monochromatic format with a bit of film grain and lens flare going on. Now, there's quite a lot of lens flare, actually. This lamppost alone is already sort of highlighting this area. But it does actually get worse in some cases. The only other things that have actual color to them are the police lights, and that's a massive glitch there, police getting out of this car. And anything that happens to be red. So,
killing time.
now the dialogue itself is fairly bland. I wonder if it's deliberately done that way or not, but either way, it is quite simplistic. There's nothing really much to it. There are drivable vehicles, but good luck actually trying to control them, because they are actually a pain in the ass to control. Because when you are on foot, WASD is an isometric controls. After all, this is an isometric game, however the cars do not control in that way. So A and D to turn is suddenly a very, very different thing to have to do. Now, there are destructible environments. For example, I can just drive straight through, however I seem to have stuck the car a little bit. You can just drive straight through and destroy walls in this way. However, that shelf appears to be a lot stronger than the actual wall on the outside was for some reason. So that is something we can do. I appear to be stuck right now. Yeah, we're well and truly stuck now. So this is just another problem with the game. Now I managed to get out. Is that because of the graphic style they've chosen, it's very hard to see a lot of things. Right now it's a brightly lit area, so we can actually see all of the civilians in this area, and the frame rate is just killing itself right now. However, when we go over to parks and any area that has very little light, it becomes understandably more difficult because everyone seems to blend in with the ground. So that is not good at all. However, we can hold Alt, and it'll highlight people around us. So that is one thing that you can do, but I don't feel that that should excuse the problem initially, because the actual characters shouldn't be that hard to see. They really shouldn't. Now, the executions themselves do have a decent variety in the animations. For the most part, they are decently well done. Like, they're not awkwardly animated in any way. They look, for the most part, kind of realistic. So the quality of the animations themselves aren't bad. However, for a game that is supposed to be about violence and all that, it's not actually particularly violent. And this comes down to the basic core of the problem that I have with this game. There isn't that much about it that strikes me as anything particularly fantastic. Now, when it was first announced, people were talking about how, you know, it would be a big statement about video game violence, and how even an ultra-violent game isn't the cause of any problems, and so on and so forth. And people were talking about free speech and anti-censorship and all that. And really, there isn't anything about this game that I would say is particularly violent as opposed to other games. After all, you can do all of this in games like GTA and Postal and even Manhunt. And there's many other games besides that are far more violent and gory than this. So, there isn't actually anything that special in the world of video games about this. Put simply, if there was ever any problem with video game violence, I doubt this would be even the best example of it, because what I'm saying is there are other games that are far more violent than this. But even as a twin stick, the controls are very awkward. The graphic style, while interesting at first, appear to be able to kick this wall in. While the controls themselves don't seem to work all that well. And the biggest problem I have is the camera as well. Like, there is an aiming mode that allows you to see much further away, but it's very, very shaky. So it's very hard to even see what you're looking at, because for some reason it also changes the angle that you're looking at, so it becomes even harder to see. For example, here, this wall is actually blocking a line of sight that I can't actually see behind. Now, of course, I could hold down Alt in order to get... Can't shoot through that wall either. I could actually hold down Alt to see what enemies are out there or even behind walls, but the thing is, I shouldn't have to do that. As far as I'm concerned, a graphic style should just still be a style. It shouldn't affect the function of the game unless it's part of a core gameplay mechanic, and in this case, it's just awkward and it gets in the way of actually playing the game. Now, as far as it actually being a game, we boil it down to its bare essentials. Even as far as twin sticks go, this isn't the most interesting one either. There's twin sticks out there that are much more engaging and have a lot more, I suppose, fun in them. For example, recently I covered Helldivers on my channel, and even though that's a PX4 exclusive, it's an example of a twin stick that has variety and is far more interesting to play. This, on the other hand, you're fighting enemies that don't really fight back. They tend to really just run away, and there isn't really much to shooting them. You could say, yeah, alright, you're supposed to feel bad for shooting civilians, but there's no human aspect in them. There's no emotional development. Like, you don't see a happy town before you come into it. So the only assumption I guess I could make was that, well, stuff like this happens all the time, maybe. Or maybe these were actually genuinely bad people. Who knows? Like, there's no human aspect to any of this. And when civilians do grab guns to kind of defend themselves, they're gunned down so quickly it doesn't even matter. You could actually encounter a group of enemies, or rather a group of civilians rather, and one of them has a gun, and if you just fire in their general direction, even the one that's trying to defend themselves will still get taken down. It's quite pointless, so they might as well not even fight back. So there really isn't a lot to this. And that's kind of unfortunate, but then again, I did originally say that this was a game that was going to sell based on controversy than actual gameplay. And I'd like to even say that it was competent, but it lacks a certain degree of polish. The menus look very basic. There are visual glitches all over the place. For example, bodies warping back and forth. And the animation quality, while good, it lacks variety. It's all very samey after a while. And even with destructible environments, it still doesn't really save this game, because, well, what game hasn't had destructible environments before? We've had Battlefield Bad Company, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4. These are games, even Crysis, for example, that have had destructible environments. This is not something we haven't seen before, so what is exactly special about this game? And it's something that I find very difficult to really pick out. So, is it any good? Well, if you're looking for a decent twin stick, this isn't it. At its best points, it's what I would call competent. It at least functions as a twin stick, but it has clunky controls, an awkward camera, and even the camera angle switching during executions doesn't always work indoors and causes the camera to get stuck under things. So couldn't really call it 100% competent either. The menus lack polish, and its graphic style is just... Even though there have been monochrome games before, and I can see what they were going for with this, it really just gets in the way of the actual gameplay, and it might have been better off with less film grain and less harsh contrast. So that's all there really is to it. I was kind of hoping that I'd be proven wrong about this game, but frankly, there isn't a lot to it. Yes, it's controversial, you're playing as a spree killer, and I would like to see games where you're the antagonist a little bit more, but this is not the best example of that, and frankly, it really can't be recommended. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Panzer taking a look at Hatred. It's now available on Steam for $20 or your regional equivalent currency. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.